However, It Still Moves is the debut full length from Sporae Autem Yuggoth, a death doom metal band out of Chile, who certainly started out with a sort of sludge and traditional doom metal influenced death metal sound for a fairly underrated EP, which explored traditional death doom metal sounds in a way that was not so standard. I think there was a little bit of a cathedral influence, something I would compare to like Doom Mortalis, and a lot has changed since then in the sense that the pandemic happened. Their guitarist left, and they gained a keyboardist. So that changed their sound quite a bit. If you were one of the few people who was familiar with their first EP, you'll find that this new record, or this full length debut, is less focused around the riff and the big jogging moment, and more influenced by a more somber and atmospheric style of death doom metal. So instead of describing that right off the bat, we'll just listen to one of the songs, or a clip of one of the songs, and get there. So as death doom metal took a step beyond Lost Paradise and Cathedral's first EP, they definitely the world over began to play death metal differently, and a good obscure example of that is Pentacrostic's debut, The Pain Tears, from the early 90s. But we could also look to shades of Night Descending from Evoken. And those two releases are where I would kind of start looking for ways to describe, or places to describe, elements of Sporae Autem Yuggoth's debut full length, because there is a heavy presence of keyboards, which is both melodic and atmospheric driver between piano-based melodies and atmospheric kind of celestial synth, as well as this just being a kind of an old school death doom metal band in terms of riffs, deep growls, and that sort of inventory of early to mid 90s death doom, particularly in the British and Scandinavian quality, which does touch a little bit upon everything from like the second and third Tiamat albums, all the way up to maybe even some early Funeral death doom. So what we get here is, in maybe more simpler terms, is a very atmospheric death doom metal record, again, with a very strong feature of keyboards. So where does the conversation go from there about this album? I think that it really has to boil down to the fact that there are 3 or 4 very long involved songs on here, which are about 10 to 12 minutes, and there's a few that are about 6 minutes, which are quite good. And the shorter songs get eaten up by the longer songs on this very quite long album. It's about an hour long, and I don't see, it erases some of the impact and value of those 6 to 7 minute pieces, when the longer pieces are much more involved and developed and have a long build up and a bigger payoff. So uh, it bothered me that, like, a song like Disintegration, which is one of the more profoundly written pieces on the album, was sandwiched between these two even bigger and more effective songs, where it kind of lost its special nature as a shorter, less developed piece. So it's not that any of that's bad; it's too much of a good thing, if anything. So it's not really a complaint. It's more that the listening experience began to consume itself with so many ideas packed into 1 hour long record, and it reads incredibly dense with ideas, and all of them pretty good and representative of 90s death doom metal. So if you're a fan of that, there is just a lot packed into this record that, if you like the throwback feeling of keyboards and death metal from a certain era, you'll really appreciate this style, which even kind of touches upon some neoclassical rhythmic touches along the way. So there's some cool stuff in there. It does feel like the Lovecraftian name that it has, and really was a record that I appreciated and continue to listen to fairly often. So A high recommendation for me. I think that they could certainly edit down a little bit and be even more potent per release. But this is like a very enthusiastic and impressive debut, which, you do feel some of the conflict of all these ideas pushing around together. But ultimately, it's a pretty great debut from a band that most people probably haven't heard of. So definitely worth checking out. You can read the full review on the website and check the album out next week.